Recording now, Tony.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, it's Tony Verhoeven, the Exchange Community Manager at CSIA. Thank you for attending this month's CSIA webinar. Today, Chalmers Brothers will present Leadership, Conversations, and Results. A reminder that if you have questions for our speaker, please use the Q&A box to the right of your screen, not the chat box. This program, like many of CSIA's webinars, will be archived on controlsys.org, typically within 1 or 2 days of the broadcast. Many thanks to John Weber, Monica Anderson, and the whole team at Software Toolbox for hosting and sponsoring our monthly webinars. Software Toolbox was created in 1996 to rid the industry of bad third-party software experiences. They do this by providing a single contact source for a variety of industrial automation software tools and applications, the knowledge of how they work together, or with automation software to deliver end-user value, and a responsive, proven support process, all focused on lowering risk. Looking for solutions? Find them on the web at softwaretoolbox.com. Today's presenter, Chalmers Brothers, is the best-selling author of Language and the Pursuit of Happiness and Language and the Pursuit of Leadership Excellence. These books have been adopted by the leadership and coaching programs at Georgetown University, George Mason University, Harley-Davidson Motor Company, and many others. His 2014 TED Talk is entitled How Language Generates Your World and Mine. Chalmers has clients nationwide, and his work is focused on leadership and personal development, workplace culture, accountability, trust, and relationship building. Please welcome Chalmers Brothers.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you for the opportunity to connect with the community. It was an enjoyable experience in Fort Lauderdale at the conference, and I'm really pleased to be with you guys. So for the next hour, right, our title today is Leadership, Conversations, and Results. So for the next hour, our three focus areas are going to be leadership, conversations, and results. And when we use the word results this morning, please think very broadly. Productivity is a result, of course, as is productivity, profitability, but your corporate culture is a result. The nature of your most important relationships, these are results. Your public identity, how you show up in the world, is a result. So when we use the word results today, please think that broadly, quantitative and qualitative results. How many of us listening here today are in the business of producing quantitative and qualitative results with and through other people? Virtually all of us. So please listen this way. Next, my intent this morning is to share with you maybe a new lens, a new way of understanding some of the basic actions all of us need to take in our role as leaders, and to look at the actual actions of leadership through a slightly different lens. And part of my job this morning, in addition to, I hope, offering something new, I want to be a professional reminder, because I know many of you know some, and some of you know a lot of what I'm going to say today already, but my intent is to possibly frame it in a way that you can more effectively apply what you know in your life. Lastly, as we get started, please listen not just with your work hat on, obviously, but also for how you can apply this in your personal life, because the topics we're going to cover here, I'm going to claim have relevancy not just at work, but also at home for us. So as we move forward, everything starts, let me grab make sure I can do this, Monica. Yep. The starting point, everything begins, every change, every purposeful improvement that we ever make begins with self-awareness. My starting point for everything I do is a big eye in the sky looking at a stick person. It's meant to indicate you taking a look at you. I focus on self-awareness, becoming a more powerful, more competent observer of ourselves as step number one, because of some basic claims I'm going to make that underlie all the work I do. Basic claim number one, you cannot change another human being. Right? Who has tried? Who is married, by the way? Right? I've been married 31 years. I love my wife. She can and she does influence me, yes. But she cannot change me. I can change me. But I can't change what I don't notice. You can't change what you don't see. Now, you may notice and choose not to change. Great. Now you have your eyes open. But if we don't notice, we don't even get to choose. Second basic claim, we are not hermits, meaning we do what we do already with and through people. Work, obviously, family, church, Rotary Club, volunteer, with and through people. Anybody here listening today that doesn't do a big part of your life with and through people, a lot of this morning for you will be an interesting academic abstraction with no practical value. But for most of us, we are already in the relationship business. I was with a group of mid-level managers, and one guy said, you know, I've only been in my new job as a manager for about 6 months, but I can tell you already this job would be so much easier without these people, right? Another guy said, hey, look, man, you take those people away, you got no job. That is your job. Accomplishing results with and through people is your job. Basic claim number 3. If you always, oops, there it is. If you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. We want to produce a new result. That word again, results. We have to take new actions. And let's be very clear. If you are in a role as a leader or manager, many of your most important actions have nothing to do with how physically strong your arms and legs are. All right? They're not physical actions, but they are real. And these leadership actions we'll talk about. Number 4, we are always at choice, meaning we are choosing in our lives every moment, every moment, every moment. And back to the big I, many of us are not very powerful observers of the choices that we have. One of my intentions today is to make sure that we end the webinar, you having choices at the end that you don't have in the beginning. I ask this in my workshops, those of us who are parents. Have we not said to our kids, right, at some point in time, depending on their ages, some version of this, pay attention to your choices, because your life is going to unfold the way it unfolds largely because of the choices that we make. And many of us, again, we aren't very powerful observers of the choices that we have. How you see things matters, and it matters a lot. And let's be very clear. It's possible that a friend of mine and I can see something really, really differently, but that difference has nothing to do with our retinas, right? It's not a biological or retinal thing, but something important is at stake. Please consider, how many of us know people that the way they see a problem or a situation is itself a big part of the problem, right? The way that they have framed it has paralyzed them. Everybody, this is a subtle point, but I'd like to try to make it this morning. In addition to supporting you, I hope, in becoming a more powerful observer of yourself, I have a secondary objective. I'd like to support you in becoming a more powerful observer of the way you observe, right? Getting better at looking at how you look at things. So how you look at things can then itself become one of the variables that you get to explore should you decide you want to produce a new result. So for the next hour, please listen that way. Can you use what we're covering as a means to strengthen your ability to look at how you look at things so we can be more at choice about whether the way that you're looking at things is serving you or not, given the results you say you want. And finally, change is permanent, so get used to it, right? Basic claim number 6, it's not you, it's not me, it's bigger than us, but the way we think about change, relate to change, navigate change, purposefully induce change, has a huge impact on a wide variety of our results. So to move us forward, there's a question I want to tee up and have you to consider, and if you want to write something down, that's fine. If you want to just think about it, that's fine. But the question is, as a leader, what do you get paid to do? Now, everybody does, in your role as a leader, does 10,000 things. The question is, of those 10,000 things, what would you say are the most important or the most essential, or the most critical 1 or 2 or 3. Please take a moment. Think about your role as a leader, the most important 1 or 2 or 3 things that you say you get paid to do. So please bring something to mind. And everybody, I've had this conversation for 20 years with senior leaders, mid-level leaders, and some of the answers we get when we ask people this question may be similar to what you've come up with. Leaders get paid to establish vision and direction, right? To set the tone, lead by example, to motivate and inspire others, to create an environment for innovation and success, to establish, maintain core processes, coaching, mentoring. Leaders get paid to set the strategy, ensure alignment, right? To groom the next generation of leaders, to keep the lights turned on, right? All of these things. These are a fantastic list, and we could go on and on. Most important things that leaders get paid to do. Now, in having this conversation, one thing, by the way, those of you listening with direct reports, you can do this activity with your direct reports, meaning if you have a meeting, say, hey, look, guys, before we start the regular meeting, let's just have a different conversation. I know everybody here does 10,000 different things, but of those 10,000 things you do, what would you say are the most important 1 or 2 or 3 things that you get paid to do in your job? And if you introduce it that way and tee it up that way and have that conversation, what you may very well find is that what you think they get paid to do may not be exactly what they think they get paid to do. And that little bit of daylight between what you think and what they think may be really, really fertile ground for a very productive, informal conversation about roles and responsibilities. I've had this conversation for a lot of years. At the bottom of this page, we have 3 circles. Leaders get paid, I'm going to offer, no matter what industry you happen to be in or how simple or complicated your organization may be. Relationships, culture, and execution, the big 3 I'm going to claim of ultimately what leaders get paid to do. First, can we see that no matter what industry you happen to be in, that leaders get paid to establish and cultivate mutually beneficial, productive relationships inside and outside the organization, right? Very difficult to imagine a good leader who can't do this. Next, leaders get paid to shape something we're going to call workplace culture. Here's a question. Do organizations have a culture? Yes. Does that culture impact results? Yes. Right? Try to have a productive brainstorming conversation around a table of deeply resentful, deeply cynical people. Not going to happen. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is Peter Drucker from a long time ago. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, I ask people, in everyday language, what does that actually mean? Now, what does that mean, culture eats strategy? It does not matter how brilliant the strategy may be. If the human beings that are the enablers of that can't coordinate and collaborate and communicate, the strategy will never see the light of day. It doesn't mean strategy is unimportant, right? It's huge. But it means when culture and strategy collide, culture always wins. People can copy your strategy. They can't copy your culture. It's an inside job, right? You have to do this on your own. I've been doing this work for about 31 years now. In the past 5 years, I've had more conversations with leaders about the conscious, purposeful creation of culture as a competitive advantage than I had in the first 26 combined. Something is going on with awareness today about the importance of culture and the purposeful, not haphazard, not accidental, the purposeful creation of culture as a competitive advantage. Everybody got the same access to technology, same access to capital, same access to information. The differentiator is the culture. And third, leaders get paid to execute, right, to actually achieve tangible, measurable results in the real world. Do you see causal relationships among these 3? Meaning, do you see relationships between the relationships and culture? Does culture impact relationships? Does new relationships impact culture? Does culture impact the way people work together? Does the way people work together impact the culture? So folks, as a leader, rest assured, if you undertake any initiative designed to improve any of these 3 areas and you keep it up long enough, you're going to have impact on the other 2. And please take a look at culture and execution in particular. Can we see that culture and execution can be understood as the soft and the hard, the subjective and the objective, the intangible and the tangible, the qualitative and the quantitative, right? 2 complementary sides to the same organizational performance coin. Now, I want to invite you to take a look at something here, and I want to introduce a way of looking at leadership that in some ways may be so close we don't see it. Pretend with me that I am outside your office, looking through your windows, and I'm watching you do all these things. I'm watching you establish the vision and direction. I'm watching you create an environment for innovation and success. I'm watching you establish and maintain core processes. I'm watching you coach. I'm watching you mentor. I'm watching you do all these things. What do my eyes actually see you doing as you're doing these things? So think very concretely. I'm watching you through the window do these things. What am I actually seeing you do? I want to invite you to consider. I'm going to see you having conversations. I'm going to see you talking and listening. So here it is. As a leader, you get paid to have effective conversations. right? You get paid to have conversations, the outcome of which is something and not something else. And this is so close we can miss it. You are a conversational architect and a conversational engine. Think about it. Can you be a strong leader without the ability to lift 100 pounds over your head? Yes, it's a metaphor. Can you be a powerful leader from a wheelchair? Yes, and we have historical examples all over the place. My wife is a physician. She's an OBGYN. One of our friends is a surgeon. And he said, Chalmers, you know, I got something going on in my right index knuckle. It's been bothering me for about 6 months now. I finally went to the doctor last week. Well, I found out it is the beginning of arthritis. Well, now I'm concerned. I'm 42 years old. Now I'm concerned. Why is he concerned? He's concerned because he gets paid to cut. He gets paid to extract, right? Fine motor skills. Huge physical dimension of that man's job. Now, I'm not suggesting you have no physical dimension to your job as a leader, but the invitation is to look at the relative difference in importance between the physical and the conversational. So everybody, given the centrality of conversations for leadership effectiveness, as we've just touched on, and deeper than this, given the centrality of conversations for process improvement, for customer service, for conflict resolution, right, for innovation, I'm going to say today it's worth spending some brain cells looking at this thing called language, because that's what it is. So the question, what is language? What is language for? If you ask this question, what is language? What is language for, to 100 people or to 1 million people? What will the vast majority of the responses be? What's the everyday common sense answer to this question? I'd like to offer a tool for communication or some variation of that. Everybody, that is such a widely held way of understanding language that most people don't see that as a way of understanding. No, they see it as a fact. That's such a widely held paradigm, if you would, that most people don't see that as a paradigm about language. No, they see it as a definition. I'd like to invite you to consider a new way of looking at this thing called language, or at least a complementary way of looking at this thing called language. And I'm going to offer it this way. Language creates and generates. It does not simply describe. It does not simply describe. Let's do some examples here so we can make this real. If I ask a friend of mine, will you have lunch with me tomorrow, Jim, at 1 o'clock? And if he says yes, we have just now invented a tomorrow at 1 that 5 seconds ago is not going to happen. We aren't describing anything. We're making something happen. Think about every time in your life you ever said the word yes, right? Every time. So here's the question. If all those times instead you had said no, would your life be different? Yes. Yes, right? You wouldn't be sitting here listening to the webinar. Perhaps you wouldn't be in your current job. Many, many things would be very, very different. One of my favorite stories about how language creates is a baseball story. After a big game, these two umpires are sitting around talking, and the first one says, you know, Joe, he's a fabulous umpire. There's balls and there's strikes. He calls them like they are. And the second umpire said, no, no, Joe is a great umpire, but there's balls and there's strikes, and he calls them like he sees them. At that point, Joe walks up and said, y'all both wrong. He said, there's balls and there's strikes, but they ain't nothing till I call them. You with me? When he says strike three, you're out. This question is for everybody listening here today who is either married right now or who has ever been married. And it's a simple question. Is it different being married than not being married? Yeah, yes. It's different legally, socially, sexually, emotionally, financially. It's different. So the obvious question, right? How did we go from being not married to being married? Somebody said something. I do. And in that moment, it's different. And it's not trivially different. It's not marginally different. No, it's really different. Everybody, we speak ourselves into the world. We speak ourselves into the world. I'm not suggesting we don't describe with language. Of course we describe with language. What I'm saying is that is not all that we do. That is not all that we do. And for those of us who get paid to have effective conversations, learning something about this not all that we do side of language can be very, very helpful, because everybody listening here today, and myself included, we are ongoingly producing non-physical but very real results out of how we wield this tool. How was the United States of America created? Right, think about it. What is there in the archives under the glass right next to the Constitution, the Declaration? This country was declared into being. Now, there was work to do after that, yes, but without the Declaration, we have no country. Think about the organizations represented by CSIA, right? All those different corporate entities. The question is, how are all of those entities created? How are all those organizations created? Well, the answer is right in the same way. And we can dig it up if we want to, the original Articles of Incorporation. We hereby shareholders do hereby declare ABC Par 100 August 1st, the company does not exist. August 2nd, it does. And you guys knew this when you joined the call today. But I want to make explicit what is often implicit. I want to be overt and explicit here about the generative creative dimension of this everyday thing that we call language. Let's have a personal example. Think about an argument you've had in your life with somebody that you cared about, and the argument escalated. It was bad. It was not fun for you, not fun for the other person. Bad argument. But at some point, the argument does come to a close. You and the other person separate, and as you're cooling off, as you're calming down, this thought slowly at first trickles into your mind. You know, as I think about it now, kind of looking back at it, I actually wish I hadn't said that. Has anybody here ever had that experience? Yes, if we're honest with ourselves. It's a very big club called all of us. So here's the question. No matter what we may have been arguing about, why do we ever think or say, I wish I hadn't said that? Why does that ever come up? Well, when we look back at it, we can see that we produced a result back there. We didn't just describe. And now looking back, we say, that is not an outcome I wanted to produce. A diminishment of possibilities is a result. A shift in context is a result. A change in the nature of an important relationship is a result, are they not? Well, yes, they're not physical, but they are real. But they're real. I want to take a 5-minute detour into the domain of adult learning with you guys. Here's a question. Do we live right now in a background of ongoing relentless change? Yes. Given that background of change, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is learning, therefore, for your company? On a scale of 1 to 10. It's a 10, is it not? How important is learning for each of us as individuals? It's a 10. One of my favorite philosophers, a guy named Eric Hoffer, says this: in times of change, those who are prepared to learn will inherit the land, while those who think they already know will find themselves wonderfully equipped to face a world that no longer exists, right? Spectacularly prepared for yesterday. Now, everybody listening has been a teacher and a learner in your life. I know that. So here's a question. Independent of subject matter now, learning to ride a bike, learning to rebuild a relationship, learning to lead a company in times of change, what would you say are some prerequisites for learning? Right? What has to be in place to optimize the learning? Everybody, I asked this question to a lot of people over a lot of years, and the number one answer is something called open-mindedness. Make sense? This notion of being open-minded, open to learning. Now, we know this is a metaphor. My head's not popped open, right? So where does open-mindedness live? Where does it dwell? And I know this is kind of an awkward question, right? But if you were looking for open-mindedness in somebody else, where would you go poking around? Where should you go looking? I want to offer in our internal conversations, our internal narratives. Your internal conversations this morning, as you're participating in this webinar, those are not byproducts of your current level of open-mindedness. No, they're producing it because language creates. You change my internal conversations, you can and will change my degree of open-mindedness. And everybody, there is a powerful, powerful prerequisite for learning that is a close cousin to open-mindedness, and you guys know what this is already. It's when the learner thinks or says out loud, I don't know. I don't know. When you say or think, I don't know, you're not describing a state of affairs nearly as much as you're producing something. And what you're producing is called a context or an opening for learning, right? And everybody knows this because how many of us have ever tried to teach somebody something when the learner thought they already knew it? How much learning takes place? Not very much. So everybody, as leaders, the invitation is this. How do you treat people inside your organization who say, I don't know? Right, this is the culture question. As a conversational architect, What do you do with this? How do you treat people inside your organization who say, I don't know? Now, I don't know, and I'll find out by Tuesday, and now it's Wednesday. We're not talking about that, right? That involves commitment and accountability and is very, very different. Here, I'm only referring to the first time it raises its head. The first time it becomes apparent, is it okay to say, I don't know? And while there are a great many it depends, and I'll grant you that, I'm still going to make the claim, if as a leader, one of your desired results is a sustainable culture of innovation and creativity, and if you repeatedly slap people's hands or embarrass them when they say they don't know, you're going to have a hard time achieving that result. Those are incompatible. You may need to be explicit and overt to create a safe space for your employees here. It may need to look something like this. Hey, guys, listen. Before we get into our regular staff meeting, let me say something. Is everybody around this table, are we all utterly comfortable? It's okay if you don't know something. It's not a character defect, right? Nobody knows everything. I didn't hire you because I thought you knew everything. No, I want you on this team because I know you can contribute and grow and learn with us. I have a request. If you ever find yourself at one of my meetings not knowing something, I hereby request 100% of those times you let me or us know so we can talk about it. You may need to be that overt or explicit in order to create that degree of openness. You guys heard the expression, success is a learning disability, right? And so you may have some very successful people that have the it's not okay to not know thought in their head, and you may need to be explicit in order to help them here. Folks, there are some basic claims about looking at this way of language I want to get to and share with you to build this. Number one, we all live in language. Now, this expression that we live in language is a bit awkward. So what does it mean? I'd like to frame it this way. Who here listening today has the little voice inside? Right, the one that says, what you talking about? That's what I'm talking about. Right, we all do. Who has a debate team? Right, I asked this question, many hands go up. One of my favorite quotes of all time is attributed to Mark Twain. He allegedly said something to this effect: I'm always in conversation, and sometimes other people are involved. It's not just Mark Twain or schizophrenics, it's us. And everybody, because we live in language, this is what we do. We are confronted with events continually. You and I are confronted with events at home, events at work, events at the client location, events on the shop floor, events on the highway, events with our children. And what we as human beings do is, number one, we make up stories about these events. Two, we hold these stories to be the truth. And three, we forget that we made them up. We forget that we made them up. And folks, when I use the word story in this context, I don't mean fib or fabrication. This is not a purposeful manipulation, and it's certainly not a self-deception. It's simply an interpretation. It's an explanation. A fundamental distinction for those of us interested in increasing our levels of self-awareness, a fundamental distinction is this: event is not equal explanation. Event is not equal explanation. One example, pretend you have a middle school or high school child. The child comes home, looks you right in the face. The first thing out of their mouth is, I'm stupid. And you say, what are you talking about, son? I'm stupid. What are you talking about? I got an F on my physics midterm. Now, in this little example, what's the event? The F on the test. What's the explanation? I'm stupid. Question, if that kid lives in that conversation long enough, is that a descriptive thing or a creative thing? It's creative. And forget the F in the test story now and think much more broadly. Is it the events of your life or your explanations about those events that are more influential as to the actual actions you end up taking in the world? Which is it? It's the explanation. Now, out of the actual actions you take in the world, you produce something called results, do we not? In a tremendously wide variety of situations. And everybody, the explanation is always the springboard, never the event. Never the event. Out of any given event, how many possible explanations are there? Well, it's infinite. It's infinite. I'm going to share with you what happened to me when I was first taught this. Here's where my mind went. Okay, I guess I'm doing it. I guess I am making up explanations out of the events that occur in my life. The actions I take are based on my own explanations, of course, and the results I produce are a function of the actions I took or didn't take. I get it, I'm doing it. But you know what? Explanations are either right or wrong, and mine are almost always right. I'd like to invite you this morning not to do that. Meaning I'd like to invite you this morning not to quickly and automatically throw the right-wrong grid or the right-wrong scaffolding on top of your and other people's explanations. How about we have a substitute grid, something called powerful versus unpowerful, or effective versus ineffective. The questions now look like this. Is your explanation powerful or unpowerful given the results you say you want? Is your explanation effective or ineffective given what you say you want to be, do, or have with this company? Given what you say you want to be, do, or have in this situation, in this relationship? Everybody, always with the tagline, given the results you say you want, never in a vacuum, because you are doing this already anyway. That question is not up for discussion. You are Mark Twain. You're doing this already. The only thing we're talking about right now is big I self-awareness. Do you see this about yourself? That's the only conversation we're having. How many of us know people who do not see this about themselves, right? It looks like this. Look, man, that's not my interpretation of what happened at that meeting. No. I was myself personally at that meeting. I'm telling you, that's exactly what happened at that meeting. Everybody is interpreting, no matter what, no exceptions ever. One of my teachers said, Chalmers, look at it this way. Everything that is said by someone. Of course, someone who was born somewhere, in some culture, in some time period somewhere, raised by human beings who have standards, values, beliefs, life experiences, just like us. But everybody, here is the upshot, and it is a self-awareness upshot. If you do not see this about yourself now, that you're making up explanations and taking action based on them, and then you couple that with not producing some important result that you say you want, well, then the option for you of authoring a more powerful interpretation, it'll never occur to you, right? It'll be off your radar screen, because if you don't see yourself as doing this now, well, there's nothing to update. And what you will have effectively done in that moment is take off the table even the option of looking at how you look at things. Right? You will have removed that variable from the field of play and done so in a time of relentless ongoing change. Not recommended. Not recommended. One or two more points here. Do your explanations have anything to do with your moods? Big time. Big time. And many of us, back to the big I, we are terrible observers of our own moods. We don't even see them as moods half the time. We see them as the way things are. In many ways, my wife is a better observer of my mood than me. Right? After 31 years together, and she said, Chalmers, why are you in that mood? My response, at least half the time, is, what mood? What mood? I'm not being pessimistic. I'm being realistic. Right? You know, objective, unburdened by all the filters that have you clogged up. Fundamental distinction, everybody, is this awareness. The necessary starting point to take advantage of this is acknowledgement of our own role as the author. Everybody think of it this way. When you are doing parenting or counseling or guiding or mentoring, right, in any context, is this not what you're trying to do with the other person? Right? Help the other person see this separation. Because you can see if they adopted a different explanation, maybe not I'm stupid, maybe I didn't study hard enough, right? That would lead to a different action and a different result, and this is the result they claim they want out the other side of their mouth. And we can see this, can we not, clearly when it's about other people? Yes. The challenge is, can we see it about ourselves? The necessary level of self-awareness that's required to take advantage of this is to live with this separation consciously, and to take ownership as the author of your own explanations. Everybody, there are 5 core competencies I believe that are required for organizational success today: functional, technical, conversational, relational, and emotional. A couple of things here. Thinking about events and explanations. Have you ever known somebody that made up an explanation completely devoid of facts? Right? Not an event in sight. Yes. It is a key leadership competency, a conversational competency, to be able to help people keep facts and opinions separate. I invite you to do this. If you're at a meeting and in your eyes the meeting is no longer productive, it's devolved into something not very productive, I invite you to do something like this. Hey guys, listen, stop. I want to continue this conversation, but with your permission, I'd like to have a new ground rule in place. And the ground rule I'd like to have in place is, when you hear someone say something, you say, listen, I agree with what you just said. I like what you just said. My question, however, is, are you saying that that's a fact? Are you saying that that's your opinion? Are you with me? We now have room in the conversation. Are you saying that that's a fact, Jim, or is that your opinion? We have room in the conversation for this, because now we get to say, how did you go from event A to explanation B in such a very different way that I went from now I know saying event A to explanation C? How did you get there? Right? What did you infer or deduce that I didn't infer or deduce? What did you assume or conclude that I obviously didn't? That's a productive conversation, but not if we can't separate events from explanations. It is a conversational competency to be able to do that. And everybody, as a conversational architect, right, that would be available to shape that kind of meeting. Now, as you look at these competencies, one question: which competencies for most companies in most industries get most people hired? Now, when I ask this question in groups, well, usually it's technical and or functional, right? The top two, with some exceptions, but certainly the top two. Next question: the longer you stay with the company and the higher up one progresses, what will get you fired? I want to offer deficiencies in the bottom three, in conversational, relational, and emotional. The bottom three, these are leadership competencies, are they not? These are the competencies we need as leaders for relationships, culture, and execution. If you ever wore a hard hat and steel-toe boots, you're not wearing them anymore. The tools I'd like to share with you and the context of this conversation is that these are competencies, not character attributes, right? That as a leader, your ability to develop and strengthen conversational competencies, relational competencies, and emotional competencies, these are the competencies we need as leaders no matter what industry we happen to be in, no matter what level of leadership we happen to be in. These are fundamental and gain importance as we move upward through organizations. Next, language creates and generates moods and emotions. Here's a question. We know people have moods. Do companies have moods? Yes. Do departments within companies have moods? Yes. Interesting. If you have been in an organization characterized by rampant, poisonous gossip, does that have an impact on the organization's performance? Absolutely. I spent 9 years at a company called Anderson Consulting. It turned into Accenture. And by the time I left the company, I knew there was something called corporate culture or corporate mood, and I knew it was important. I also knew this. It was squishy, nebulous, subjective, hard to define. And I thought this. I thought charismatic leaders, by virtue of the force of their personality, which is magic, by the way, that these lucky few from birth, they could magically shape culture. But the rest of us, I don't know how to do that. I can see how important workplace culture is. I just don't know how to do that. Everybody, I'd like you to consider that the conversations you require and the conversations you prohibit are wonderful leverage points for shaping this non-physical but very real thing we call workplace culture. The tools we need to shape culture are not shovels and fertilizer, obviously, right? It's a metaphor. What we need is discernment in conversations that create stuff. We can have a conversation about conversations. One might look like this. Hey, guys, listen. Before we move into our normal agenda for the staff meeting today, I want to say something. We've talked about accountability, have we not, for the last 3 months. I would like today, all 8 of us around this table, to have a public commitment that we make to each other, that if anybody around this table falls down on a commitment to anybody else around this table, that starting today we are no longer going to go trolling, no more gossiping. That's prohibited. That's not okay, right? Not okay. Furthermore, let's introduce something for us called a responsible complaint. And a responsible complaint is different than complaining. It's by definition a conversational competency. It's a conversational tool, where by definition, if somebody does fall down on a commitment, well, then we agree we're going to go directly to that person and only that person and initiate a structured conversation. These are conversational competencies. Can we also agree here today, everybody, that if you want to shape culture inside your organization, that not all behaviors are okay? Make sense? Not everything is okay. And by now we know conversations are behaviors. It is not simply the case that a company's culture or mood allows certain conversations to happen, which it does. It is equally true to claim that by having certain types of conversations, you perpetuate the mood. Causality is two-way, because language creates. So everybody, as a leader, I invite you to think about it. Are there conversations that could be or should be required in your company, given the results you say you want? Are there conversations that could be or should be prohibited, given the results you say you want? And a third mental bucket I invite you to consider, are there missing conversations? Are there missing conversations in your organization, in your onboarding process, in your conflict resolution? As a conversational architect, right? One possibility, I invite you to write the phrase missing conversations on a flip chart stand and convene a conversation of smart people inside your organization. Very good things can happen, right? You don't need to be the sole generator of these. People know what you mean. When you use the phrase missing conversations, people know what you mean. Is the real meeting happening in the bathroom, right? Is the real meeting happening after this meeting ends? Everybody, I invite you to think about when you see performance that is not up to par in your eyes, I invite you to look at it through this lens, right? Now, this isn't the only lens, but to have this lens added to your toolbox, look at it through this lens, because my experience is this. If you do, sometimes the intervention, the move that you need to make becomes very, very clear. I mean, every time we sell A, B isn't happening by definition. Oh, no, man, that's optional. Well, it's not optional anymore, right? Okay, starting today, it's required that every single time this happens, you are talking to so-and-so about X. So please add this to your toolkit. Take a look through it, especially when you see performance that in your eyes is not where it needs to be. Next, language creates and generates one more thing, and I want to introduce this with a true story. A friend of mine and I were the same age, and we joined Anderson Consulting in New Orleans 4 years apart. Now, we were good friends. We drank beer together. We're on the same softball team. Our wives were friends. We were very social. I joined the firm now 4 years after him. I'm a one-year guy. He's a 5-year guy. And I spent my first year on his project. He's my manager. So in terms of how I think I'm doing, my public identity, I'm thinking I had a pretty good first year. Now, maybe not A+, right, but certainly very solid, a very, very good year. I'm well positioned for my career at Anderson. He comes up and says, Chalmers, I need to have a conversation with you, and I'm not exactly sure how to have it. I have a concern that you may overreact to some feedback I'm going to give you about your performance this year, and you may think our friendship is in jeopardy. I promise you, our friendship is not in jeopardy now. It never will be. But there are some blind spots in your work, my friend. And I'm calling them blind spots because I don't see you working on them. And my thought process is, I've known you for 7 years, that if you saw this about yourself, that you'd be addressing it. But since I don't see you addressing it, well, I'm starting to conclude maybe you don't even see it. I have another concern. You're telling me at softball practice, and you've mentioned this 4 or 5 times, that you want a long career here. Well, my concern right now is that unbeknownst to you, if nothing changes on your part, you are right now on a trajectory. It's not going to happen for you. I know that you don't. I'm at the manager's meetings. You're not at those meetings. So I don't know the best way to have this conversation. I just know we have to have this conversation. Everybody, I invite you to speak into your concerns. This is the conversational competency I want to point to speak into your concerns, especially for your most difficult, most challenging conversations, as a way to purposely create and generate context. Language creates and generates context, not physical, utterly, utterly, utterly real. Utterly real. I'm not suggesting that you make up new concerns, right? But if you have the concern already, speak the concern out loud, especially for your most difficult, most challenging conversations. How difficult was this conversation for my friend? Very. How hard are they anyway, right? Much less friendship and all that on top. My respect for him went through the roof that day, right? I remember thinking in real time, I knew in real time how hard that was for him. I was thinking, when I grow up, I'm going to be like him. Ambitious people want to hear the negative feedback. I'll say this again. Ambitious people want to hear the negative feedback. Now, do we want to hear it in the context of trust, safety, and respect? Yes, but we want to hear it. He added 8 years to my career at that place. Everybody, we have a BS detector, do we not? Most of us, we have a very good BS detector. You know what else we have? We have an authenticity detector. We do. Now, men call it authenticity, women call it vulnerability. It's the same thing. It's how real are you going to get in this conversation? I believe this has already happened. Outside the military, leadership has already gone from command and control to inspire and enroll. And authenticity is enrolling. Right? If I get a hit that you're authentic, I want to play with you. Everybody, I'm not suggesting that you bare your soul at work and share everything with everybody all the time. I am inviting you, however, to take a look at what is your historical norm for self-disclosure, and for your most difficult, most challenging conversations to consider moving the needle to the right toward a little bit more business-appropriate self-disclosure. And what you'll be disclosing are your already held concerns for the sake of creating a possibly unprecedented context with that person. And that unprecedented context could possibly yield unprecedented actions, interactions, and results. I believe this. As a leader, your ability to create powerful context may be more important than your ability to deliver impeccable content, right? It's not about the perfect phrase or the perfect choice of words, all that. No, it's about the context. If you're in a long-term personal relationship, how many of us have already learned this about our long-term personal relationships? Conversations of self-disclosure are powerful. Are they not? How different is it for me to tell my wife, honey, I'm upset right now. I'm upset about this right now. How different is that than me withholding and simmering in silent resentment? Right? How different is the car ride, the dinner table, the bedroom? So, folks, I invite you to consider the power of context. Just because you don't purposely create context for a challenging conversation, does that mean you don't have a context? No, you got one anyway. It just may or may not be conducive to the result you say you want. So as we think about this, the purposeful, not haphazard, not accidental, the purposeful creation of context, I'm going to claim, is a fundamental leadership competency. Not physical, but very, very real, especially for challenging and difficult conversations, especially for talent development. And there is a certain type of context I want to invite you to consider and to purposely create your version of this inside your organization. And it's called carefrontation. Context of carefrontation. Now, if you've read Good to Great, you may recall Jim Collins talks about healthy, respectful disagreement as a hallmark of a great leadership team, right? Robust, authentic dialogue, carefrontation. Now, carefrontation is a made-up word. I was with a group of guys who said, yeah, but all words are made up. Like, yes. But this one's really made up. So as you look at carefrontation, it's not in the dictionary, but if it was in the dictionary and you came across it, what would it say? All right, what's the definition of carefrontation? Something like, I care enough about you to initiate a conversation with you that in this moment, I'm not 100% sure how you're going to take it. I care more about you than my hands not sweating. Right? I care more about you and the goals that you've declared are important to you than staying in my own physical comfort zone. We know this. Support doesn't mean clapping as somebody's going off the cliff. Right? That's not support. That's not support. So as a leader, I invite you, write the word carefrontation on a flip chart, convene a conversation of people on your team, and talk about it first. Talk about carefrontation. Now, listen, I'm learning some stuff in my career development, and one of the things I'm learning is that the hallmark of these powerful teams is this non-physical but very real space, very real context called carefrontation. And what it looks like is we care enough about each other. If it looks like one of us, our big I, my self-awareness, isn't turned on very strong, if you see me going down a path that to you looks inconsistent with the goals that we've set, Well, you got to call me on it, right? You have to bring it to my attention. I'm not doing it on purpose. One way to look at it is this. How many of us have ever set private goals? Mostly all of us. Who has ever set public goals? Maybe not quite as many. Here's a question. Which are more likely to happen, private goals or public goals? Well, public. Why is that? Because of accountability, right? Because now I enroll somebody else in what I'm up to, and I allow them to be confrontational with me. So everybody, as a leader, I invite you to have a conversation, again, as a conversational architect, to have a conversation with your most important teams about the non-physical but very real space you want to create for your most important conversations. And of all the types of context I've come across in my career, confrontation is up at the top of the list. I've had the great fortune of spending 18 years speaking to CEO roundtable groups. And in these roundtable groups, the hallmark of these groups that meet monthly, the hallmark is they are profoundly confrontational with each other, right? That's the value of better decision-making, to have that kind of space. So again, as a conversational architect, the first step, I think, is to talk about this. Then you can agree to start moving into it, developing your version of it, declaring yourselves to be beginners at doing confrontation, and allowing yourself some space for moving into your version of it. Now, interesting, we talked about language, right? But language doesn't occur in a vacuum, it occurs in a human being, and this is intuitive for most of us, right? Can we see that each of us can be understood as a walking, talking bundle of congruency? Language, which is our thinking, our conversations, our moods and emotions in our body. And folks, here's the key. That combination is utterly unique to you. You are utterly unique. Here is a basic claim. Let's dispel the grand illusion, therefore, that everyone sees things like I do. They do not and they cannot. If you take a tour of any facility with a group of 10 people, right, and you stay together on the tour and you come back into the room after the tour guide said, what did you notice on the tour? How many different answers is the tour guide going to get? Well, how many people went? And it's utterly predictable. So here is the key. All the collaborative action that you need to be about as a leader, by definition, is going to happen with people who are unique observers, who are not you, who do not and cannot see things like you do. That's the starting point. Now let's go forward and collaborate. Now let's go forward and achieve shared vision. But the starting point is all those other human beings, by definition, do not and cannot see things exactly like you. I like to say it this way. When you're running a meeting, you know who you have in front of you at that meeting? You have right there human beings who are profoundly and utterly not you, and they are valid expressions of what it means to be human. And it's incredible how much they are not you. That's the starting point. I found that to be a more adequate, more productive starting point than the assumption that all the people you're working with are pretty much clones of you. They're not. And folks, to this end, there is a key distinction as a conversational architect. I will be neglectful if I didn't add here. Key distinction for leaders. Hearing is not the same thing as listening. And we know this, but I want to broaden it and perhaps move in a slightly different direction. Now, this is arbitrary, but I'm going to say hearing is the biological one, right? Physics and sound waves and biology. And listening is the linguistic. Listening is active interpretation, active internal storytelling. Now, as we think about these, the key is, as a leader, therefore, it's not so important what you say. What's important is, what did they listen? Are you with me? What did they interpret? We do not have a brain-to-brain data link, right? Where I can somehow put data or meaning in your brain. No. Human communication fundamentally is about shared interpretation. I have an engineering background. Here's what I was taught about communication back in the day. Well, you got your transmitter, and you got your receiver, and you got your signal. So we can say communication has been effective if the receiver can replicate the signal 100%. That's a great model, is it not, for digital communication? It's great for TV, radio, the telegraph. It is horrible for human communication. Humans do not and cannot replicate signals. Human communication fundamentally is about interpretation. So when you're running a meeting, It's not so important what you say. What's important is what did they listen. And here is a two-part claim, everybody, and this is key. You are 100% responsible for how you listen, meaning you are 100% responsible for your internal conversations, your internal narratives. You've been making these up your entire life. You're doing it now, and you alone are the author. Part two of this claim, this is huge. You are partially responsible for how you get listened. You are partially responsible for how you get interpreted. I am partially responsible for how you interpret me on this webinar here today. You accept that? Right? I can't make you interpret me a certain way. No, no, no. But I'm in the mix. I'm not powerless. I'm in the mix. So when you're running a meeting, you are partially responsible for as to whether 1 or 4 primary interpretations walk out that door. Right? How many of us here today are interested in producing a non-physical result we call alignment or shared understanding? All of us. So here's the scenario. You're 50 minutes into a 1-hour meeting. Your desired result is alignment, shared understanding. How do you know if you've achieved that result? Right? How do you know? Here's my experience. I cannot tell just by looking at people, right? I cannot tell. I mean, some people are just smiling and nodding in the chair, got no idea what's going on. I have to ask. And folks, it's a conversational competency. I want to check our understanding. I want to check our listening. I would offer as a leader one powerful move to make if it's an important topic that you've been covering. And your job is to produce something called, it's not physical, but a real result called alignment, to have some method of checking in with people and hearing their version. Folks, this is pay me now or pay me later. Right, back in the day, there was a commercial on TV. The company was called Fram, made oil filters, and all the commercials would end with, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. I want to offer for your most important meetings, paying me now is checking in with how people listened, how they interpreted before the meeting ends. Paying me later, of course, is observing their subsequent behavior and inferring from that that they didn't understand, and now you have to go clean it up. Again, as a conversational architect and a conversational engine, having a clear separation between hearing and listening is critical. You are partially responsible for how other people interpret what you say, and you do not have a brain-to-brain data link with them, right? It's all about interpretation, and all these people listening to you are not you, right? They are not you. That's the starting point. Everybody, as we start to bring our day to a close, I'd like to give you a broad map. As you look at your organization, I want to offer something. No matter how simple or complicated, your company can always be understood with this little drawing. Under the shared roof of your desired results, right, your vision, your goals, objectives, on a foundation of your values and purpose, your company is human beings who are coordinating action, right? Global companies coordinate action globally. Local companies coordinate action locally. As a conversational architect, there are 2 fundamentally different types of conversations you can enter into for culture and execution. As we look at this, conversations for alignment, clarity, and culture, these are conversations for the purpose of creating shared understanding of the roof and the basement. Shared understanding of your organizational come from and organizational go to. Who are we? Where are we going? Why are we going there? What is important right now? What is our unique value proposition that if we deliver on it consistently, will yield competitive advantage? The question, everybody, how far down inside the organization can people answer those questions? How far down? As a leader, as a conversational architect, there are 2 types of these that you can design and convene, onboarding and ongoing, right? Onboarding is building shared understanding of your organizational come from and organizational go to for all the new employees. Ongoing, these are sustaining shared understanding, sustaining alignment, not just for the new guys, but for everybody over time. And as a conversational architect and conversational engine, there are many, many ways to drive these conversations, but they must exist inside the organization. So when you think of your role as a conversational architect and when you think of culture and alignment, I invite you to think of 2 things, onboarding and ongoing. And the desired result, these are not transactional conversations, right? They don't move the company forward. They are contextual conversations, onboarding and ongoing. Finally, when you think about execution, the middle of the house, conversations for coordinating action, now we are talking about managing commitments. And everybody, the most powerful way I have ever learned to understand the essence of an organization is it is human beings making and managing promises with each other. Think about it. Your company at a foundational level, a base level, can be understood as human beings making and managing promises with each other, a network of interconnected, nested commitments. And when you see your organization as a network of conversations like this, your ability to intervene is dramatically improved. Are we making effective requests of each other, or are we operating with assumptions and expectations? Fundamental difference. Last, I want to leave you with something, a fundamental distinction. A promise broken is not the same thing as a silent expectation met. If you are in a long-term relationship, this will serve you. If somebody breaks a promise to me, I'm going to make a responsible complaint, right? I have a trust issue. It's not okay. But if you just don't fulfill my silent expectation, I have no grounds to make a complaint of you. Now, I may certainly make a request of you, yes, but different tone, different vibe than a complaint. I believe this. I believe there are thousands, if not millions of people right now walking around offended. And they're offended because somebody in their life didn't magically fulfill their unspoken expectation, and now they're offended. Resentment is that which arises when you fail to honor a request I never made. And unfortunately, there are too many resentful people walking around. So keep them separate, keep them separate. And so with this, everybody, as a conversational architect and a conversational engine, I invite you to go forth and have powerful conversations inside and outside your organization. If I can ever be a resource for you in any way, shape, or form, the folks at CSIA know how to reach me. I'm utterly reachable. I wish you only success, and I thank you very much, Tony and CSIA, for the opportunity to do this webinar.
Thanks, Chalmers. That was great. I think we had people riveted for the entire hour, so I appreciate it. So thanks, Phil Chalmers, for your participation, and everyone for active participation, active listening, and how you listening to it. Note that the full webinar will be archived on controlsys.org within the next day or so. Many thanks to our host and sponsor, Software Toolbox. Find them on the web at softwaretoolbox.com. Shortly, you'll receive a 30-second evaluation about today's program. Your feedback is valuable to us, so we ask that you please do complete it. This is Tony Verhoeven at CSIA. Thanks for attending. Goodbye.